Matthew Adams was one of the most powerful and respected men in the entire city. People spoke his name with pride. Some said his wisdom built half of the businesses in the country. Others said his kindness fed thousands of families. He owned hotels, tech companies, real estate, and a successful logistics company that operated across borders. When Matthew walked into a room, everyone stood up. But inside his beautiful mansion, hidden behind golden walls and expensive furniture, Matthew carried a heavy sadness. The sadness had names: Natasha and Susan, his two daughters. They were his only children. He loved them deeply, but he was worried. Very worried. Natasha, the older one, was 25. She was tall, beautiful, fashionable, and always busy taking pictures for social media. She liked expensive clothes, shiny phones, designer bags, and anything that made her feel more important than others. Susan, 23, was softer and sweeter, but she followed her sister in everything. If Natasha wanted to travel, Susan would pack her bags. If Natasha wanted to party, Susan would join. If Natasha said working was stress, Susan agreed. Both of them had graduated from one of the best universities in the world. But they didn't study well. They spent most of their time in shopping malls, beach resorts, and luxury restaurants. They graduated with low results, but Matthew did not complain. He believed in giving his children love, patience, and second chances. His wife, Helen, made the problem worse without knowing it. She was elegant, beautiful, and proud. She grew up in comfort, and she believed her daughters deserved the same. She never allowed them to cook, clean, or do anything difficult. "My husband is wealthy," Helen always said. "My daughters must enjoy life. They will never suffer." Matthew kept quiet for many years, hoping the girls would grow up and change. But instead they became more relaxed, more careless, more spoiled. One afternoon, Matthew returned home tired after a long meeting. He had discussed a very important contract with foreign investors. He expected to rest. Instead, he walked into the living room and found Natasha and Susan lying on the couch, laughing loudly as they scrolled through their phones. Shopping bags were everywhere. Food plates were on the table. The TV volume was loud. Matthew looked at them and sighed. "Natasha, Susan, can we talk?" They looked up slowly, as if he was disturbing their peace. "Dad, can it wait?" Natasha asked. "I'm checking new handbags. There is a sale." Susan nodded quickly. "Yes, Father, we are busy." Matthew felt something inside him break. "Stand up," he said quietly. The girls looked confused, but they obeyed. Something in his voice told them he was serious. Helen walked in at that moment, smiling. "Honey, what is it? Why does your face look like that? Did something happen at work?" "No," Matthew said. "The problem is not work. The problem is my home." The room became silent. He looked at his daughters one by one. "Natasha, Susan, are you proud of the life you are living?" They exchanged glances. "Father," Susan said softly, "why are you asking that?" "Answer me," Matthew repeated. Natasha lifted her chin proudly. "We love our life. It's sweet, it's comfortable. We don't stress." Matthew nodded slowly. "And what about work?" Natasha laughed. "Work? Father, why should we work? You are one of the wealthiest men in the city. We don't need jobs." Susan added, "If you die now, we will inherit everything. So why should we bother ourselves?" Helen gasped softly. "Girls, that's not a nice thing to say." But her tone was weak. She didn't truly disagree. Matthew felt his heart drop. He looked at his daughters with pain in his eyes. "I sent you both to school. I begged you to take your studies seriously. You both graduated with low results, but I forgave you. I even planned to give each of you one of my companies to manage. But instead of preparing yourselves, you rely on my money like children." Natasha rolled her eyes. "Father, nobody trained us to work. You and Mother gave us soft life. We love expensive things. We can't change now." Susan smiled as if it was a joke. "Yes, Father, we enjoy comfort. We are not built for stress." Those words hit Matthew like a stone. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, his decision was already forming deep inside his heart, a decision that would change all their lives. Matthew walked away without another word. Helen waited for him to calm down, but she felt something different this time, something final. Natasha whispered, What's wrong with Dad today? Susan shrugged. Maybe he's tired. But deep inside, they both felt a small fear they could not explain. Upstairs in his study, Matthew sat alone. His hands covered his face. How did I fail as a father? He remembered the days he had nothing, no food, no bed, no parents. He worked day and night to build his empire. He wanted his daughters to enjoy a life better than his. But now they had become the opposite of what he dreamed. Lazy, proud, dependent, blind. That night Matthew did not sleep. He stared at the ceiling until morning, thinking of a solution. The trouble started the next morning. Matthew arrived at his office and his secretary rushed to him, holding several papers with a worried face. She said, "Sir, the bank called. 4 checks were withdrawn yesterday. Each one had your signature. A total of $340,000. Matthew frowned. What for? She handed him the slips. 4 Hermes Birkin bags, $85,000 each. The bank compared the signature with your records and approved it. Matthew felt his stomach twist. He knew he never signed any check. Someone had copied his handwriting. He drove home immediately. When he entered Natasha's room, he found Natasha and Susan jumping excitedly around 4 brand new Birkin bags. The bags gleamed like trophies. As soon as they saw him, both girls froze. Matthew lifted the checkbook from the table and showed them the missing pages. Who forged my signature? Natasha tried to smile. Dad, it was not a big deal. We only copied it. Your signature is easy. Matthew's eyes widened. You copied my signature to take $340,000 from my account. You forged a check just to buy handbags. Susan shrugged. But father, you are wealthy. Why are you angry? You can replace the money. Matthew held the checkbook tightly. This is not about money. This is fraud. This is theft. You both can go to prison for this. Before he could say more, Helen walked into the room. She looked at the bags, then at Matthew, and sighed loudly. Matthew, what is all this noise? Why are you stressing the girls? They forged my signature, Matthew said. They stole $340,000. Helen waved her hand as if it was nothing. And so, you have more than enough. Let them enjoy their father's money. Stop acting like a stingy man. Matthew stared at her, shocked. Helen, instead of correcting them, you're defending them. Of course I'm defending them. You are rich. Why are you crying over money? Don't embarrass us. These girls deserve luxury. Matthew took a deep breath, hurt. What if one day I lose everything? Will you be able to support this family? You don't work. You don't contribute anything. Helen stepped closer. Don't even think of going broke, Matthew. If you try it, you will regret it. And remember, when you die, your wealth will not follow you to the grave. It belongs to your daughters. So stop acting like you want to take it with you. At that moment, something inside Matthew broke. He finally understood the truth. His family had no discipline, no gratitude, and no respect. They did not see him as a father. They saw him as a money source. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The next morning, the entire mansion shook with Matthew's voice. He was shouting, crying, pacing the living room with his hands on his head. Helen came rushing downstairs. Matthew, what is wrong with you? He turned to her with tears in his eyes. Helen, everything is gone. Everything. My companies, my warehouses, my event centers, my investments, all finished. Helen blinked. What do you mean gone? Now Matthew sank into a chair, breathing hard. There was a fire last night. The warehouse burned down completely. My event centers also caught fire. The government has seized 2 of my factories over an investigation. My partners pulled out. Funding is gone. Contracts cancelled. I have lost everything. Helen laughed sharply. Matthew, stop this prank. You can't lose everything in one night. It's impossible. What kind of joke is this? I am not joking, Matthew whispered. I am finished. She folded her arms. No, I don't believe you. You are trying to teach us a lesson. Let me call your manager. She dialed the number with confidence. When the manager picked up, she said loudly, Good morning. Please tell my husband to stop this nonsense. He is pretending he lost his companies. There was a long silence on the line. Then the manager said quietly, Madam, it's true. We lost everything. The fire service came too late. The machines, the goods, everything is gone. The board is in chaos. The news will break soon. Helen's face went pale. What? What do you mean everything? The manager sighed. We are ruined, madam. I'm sorry. Helen's hands shook. Her lips trembled. She stared at Matthew as if seeing him for the first time. Matthew, you have to do something. We cannot go broke. We cannot become poor overnight. Fix this. Matthew sighed. Helen, I have been warning you for years. I begged you to save money. I begged you to learn to support this family. But you refused. You said you didn't need to work. Helen's voice rose. So what will happen now? What do you expect me and the girls to do? We cannot live without money. That is exactly the problem, Matthew said softly. You depend on me too much, all of you. You never believed I could fall. But I am human, Helen. Anything can happen in life. She shook her head aggressively. No, no, no. You cannot lose everything. You must find it back. Call someone, borrow, sell something. We can't become ordinary people. Matthew looked at her with pain in his eyes. Helen, we are ordinary people now, she gasped. Don't say that. Do you want to kill me? My daughters are not built for suffering. They can't eat cheap food. They cannot walk, cook, or clean. Matthew, do something. Matthew stood up slowly. I warned you. I warned Natasha. I warned Susan. None of you listened. None of you thought I could struggle. You believed money would never finish. Helen pointed at him angrily. If you don't fix this, I swear you will regret it. I did not marry a poor man. Matthew's heart cracked again. So that's what I am to you? A wallet? A bank account? Helen didn't answer. She just kept shaking and mumbling, We can't be poor. We can't be poor. Natasha and Susan came downstairs, hearing the shouting. When they learned the news, they burst into tears. No shopping, Natasha cried. No vacation. No allowance? Susan sobbed. No luxury. Helen hugged them dramatically. Don't worry, girls. Your father will fix it. He must. Matthew watched them cling to each other, crying not because they lost him, but because they lost money. At that moment, he knew the test he planned was not only necessary, it was the only way to save his family from destruction. 2 days later, Matthew had made his final decision. Before dawn, he packed 2 suitcases quietly. When Helen woke up and saw him dragging the bags into the living room, she panicked. Matthew, what are you doing? He didn't look at her. I'm preparing to leave. Leave to where? To the village. Helen stepped back as if she heard something disgusting. Village? Which village? My father's old house, he replied calmly. I can't afford this mansion anymore. The bank will come tomorrow to reclaim the property. We have no choice but to relocate. Helen shouted, I am not going to any village. I cannot live like a poor woman. You don't have a choice, Matthew said. If you stay here, you will be thrown out by security. And you better warn your jobless daughters to pack their bags. The bank is not joking. Helen frowned. Matthew, my daughters cannot live in a village. They don't even know how to cook. What will they eat? Matthew sighed. They will learn. All 3 of you will learn. Life has changed. Accept it. Helen folded her arms stubbornly. I am not going anywhere. I am staying in my house. The village is for old people and suffering people. I refuse. Matthew finally stopped and faced her. Helen, that house you are talking about does not belong to us anymore. Everything here, cars, furniture, property, belongs to the bank now. If you remain here tomorrow, you will be standing on the street. She shook her head quickly. No, no, no. I cannot go from mansion to village. This is shame. This is disgrace. Matthew picked up his suitcase. Helen, I am going now. If you want to stay married to me, meet me in the village. If you don't want to come, stay here and face whatever happens. She stared at him, shocked. You are serious? You are truly leaving? Yes, he said quietly. I warned all of you for years. None of you listened. Now reality has arrived. He walked to the door. Natasha and Susan appeared at the top of the stairs, sleepy-eyed and confused. Dad, where are you going with bags? Susan asked. To the village, he said. The bank is coming tomorrow. Pack your things unless you want to be embarrassed. Natasha gasped. Village? Dad, please, stop this. We cannot live there. Matthew didn't wait for more arguments. He opened the door and stepped outside. Helen shouted after him, Matthew, if you leave this house, don't expect me to follow you. But he didn't look back. He walked straight to the gate, got into a small taxi he had ordered secretly, and left the mansion behind. An hour after Matthew left, the mansion was filled with tension. Helen sat on the couch, shaking her head again and again. Natasha and Susan were pacing around, whispering urgently. Finally, Natasha said, "Mother, we are not going to any village. Never." Susan agreed quickly. "Yes, Mum. How can we go there? Our friends will laugh at us. They will mock us. Everyone knows we live a luxury life." Natasha folded her arms. "Besides, I can't leave my handsome boyfriend. No way. He will think I am poor. I won't try it." Susan nodded. "My boyfriend also promised to take care of me. I will go and stay with him. I cannot step foot in a village." Helen looked at them slowly. "So you are both leaving me?" Natasha replied, "Mum, it's not leaving. We just can't follow Dad to suffer. We are not built for that life." Susan added, "When things get better, we will come back. But for now, we'll stay with our boyfriends." Helen closed her eyes. "What kind of daughters did I raise?" But the girls didn't answer. They packed clothes in small bags and walked out of the mansion. Natasha said, "Mum, take care. We will call you later." Susan added, "Tell Dad we love him, but we can't follow him to the village. Bye." They left without looking back. Helen stood at the doorway watching them go. For the first time, she felt truly alone. She realized her daughters only cared about enjoying life, not family, not support, not unity. After a long moment, Helen wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "If I stay here, I will sleep on the streets tomorrow. I might as well go to the village, even if I don't like it." She hurried upstairs, packed 2 bags, and left the mansion quietly. When she finally reached the village and walked into Matthew's old family compound, he was sitting outside on a wooden chair, fixing an old lantern. He looked up, his eyes widened. "Helen, you actually came." She dropped her bag angrily. "Whatever, Matthew. I came, but don't be too happy. I won't stay here for long." Matthew sighed and looked away. "At least you came." "I didn't think you would." Helen rolled her eyes. "Don't rejoice. I only came because the bank is taking everything. When things get better, I'm leaving this place." Matthew looked at her quietly, and for the first time in many years, he realized how far their hearts had grown apart. Natasha reached her boyfriend Daniel's house first. She entered happily, but stopped immediately when she saw a pregnant woman sitting on the couch. The woman looked at her boldly and said, "Who are you?" Natasha asked who she was and why she was in Daniel's house. The woman laughed and said, "I am Daniel's wife, and this is our second baby." Natasha felt her heart drop, but the woman continued, "He told me about you, the lazy city girl who spends money she didn't work for. Now that your father is broke, the whole town knows. My husband said I should tell you to leave. He doesn't date poor girls." Natasha begged to speak to Daniel, but the woman pointed at the door and said, "Get out." She slammed the door, leaving Natasha crying outside. At the same time, Susan knocked on her boyfriend Tony's door. He stepped out and closed the door behind him so she couldn't enter. She told him she needed to stay with him for a while because of the trouble at home. He sighed and said, "Susan, I heard everything. Your family is broke. I can't date someone from a broke family." Susan was shocked, but Tony repeated, "I'm sorry. I can't carry anyone's burden. Please leave." He shut the door in her face. Both sisters ended up standing outside in different places, crying in silence. The men they thought loved them pushed them away the moment the money disappeared. They finally realized that without their father's wealth, they meant nothing to these people. For the first time in their lives, they felt truly alone. Natasha arrived at the bus park first, wiping her tears, confused about what to do next. A few minutes later, she heard someone calling her name. She turned and was shocked to see Susan standing there with her own small bag, crying too. Both girls stared at each other in disbelief before running into each other's arms. They quickly explained what happened: the pregnant wife, the breakup, the insults, the door slammed in their faces. It hurt even more because their boyfriends had been pretending to love them only because of their father's money. With nowhere else to go, they bought 2 cheap bus tickets to the village. The ride was long, dusty, and silent. Neither of them had ever traveled by public bus before. They held their bags tightly and kept their heads down, praying no one recognized them. When they arrived at the village, they dragged their bags through the rough, sandy road until they reached the old family compound. Helen was sitting outside, fanning herself angrily. When she saw her daughters walking in, she gasped. "What are you two doing here?" Natasha answered bitterly. "Where else should we go, Mother? Everyone has heard Dad lost everything." Susan added, "Our boyfriends threw us out. They said they can't date poor girls." Helen shook her head. "Useless men, they were only after your father's money." The girls looked around the small compound and asked, "Where is father?" Helen rolled her eyes and said, "That useless poor man went to the farm. He told me to go with him, but I refused. I didn't leave a mansion to start farming like villagers." Natasha scoffed. "Good, Mother. We are not going to any farm. Never." Susan nodded. "Yes, we can stay here, but going to a farm is out of the question. We are not built for that kind of suffering." Helen crossed her arms. "Same with me. Let Matthew farm alone. We will manage ourselves until things get better." The three of them stood there, pretending they were still too important to work, too special to struggle. That evening, Matthew returned from the farm tired and dusty. He sat down quietly and looked at Helen. "Since you still have gold jewelry, sell some of it. I will borrow small money from friends. If we pay part of the debt, maybe the authorities will release my seized goods, and I can start again." Helen's face changed immediately. "Sell my gold? Never. You're not even sure they will release anything. Why should I sacrifice my gold for your problems?" Matthew sighed deeply. "Helen, we are married. This is the time we should support each other. When things were good, we enjoyed together." Helen stood up angrily. "I will not sell my gold for you. I am keeping it. In fact, when I finally get money, I will use it to buy an expensive car. I cannot be trekking around this village like a poor woman." Matthew looked at her quietly, pain in his eyes. "So even now, you still care more about luxury than our future?" Helen frowned. "Yes. I didn't marry you to suffer. Figure out your problems yourself." Matthew said nothing again. Not long after that, Helen started seeing a man in the village named Mr. Collins. He always spoke sweetly to her and promised her comfort. One day he told her he had a small house near the market and asked her to move in with her daughters. Helen agreed immediately and left Matthew without informing him. When Helen, Natasha, and Susan arrived at the house, the girls looked around with mixed feelings. Natasha shook her head and said, "Imagine, father had all that money in the city, yet he couldn't even afford to build a simple house in the village." Susan laughed bitterly. "Now look at him. A rich man before, but he's staying in Grandpa's old house like a beggar. What kind of man plans like that?" Helen sighed but didn't correct them. "Your father always thought money would last forever. He never prepared for this." They all laughed lightly, mocking Matthew's situation, feeling slightly relieved that they were no longer staying in the old, broken family house. That same evening, Matthew returned from the farm and found the compound empty and silent. Helen and the girls were gone. Later that evening, as Matthew sat quietly outside the old house, a neighbor named Mr. Johnson walked up to him slowly. The man looked uncomfortable and hesitant. After greeting Matthew, he sighed and said, "Sir, haven't you heard?" Matthew looked up calmly. "Heard what?" The neighbor lowered his voice. "Your wife, Helen. People are saying she is now sleeping with Mr. Collins. He even gave her one of his houses. She and your daughters have moved in." Matthew froze. For a moment he could not speak. His chest tightened and his eyes filled with pain. "So soon," he whispered. "Helen has already moved on." He laughed softly, bitterly. "Oh wow, women will never cease to amaze me." The neighbor shook his head. "With all due respect, sir, your wife is very foolish and ungrateful. After all you did for her, she didn't even wait. She chose comfort over loyalty." Matthew stood up slowly and looked into the distance. "I gave her everything. Love, respect, a good name. But when money disappeared, so did commitment." He took a deep breath and added quietly, "Now I see clearly. Money was the glue holding my family together, not love." The neighbor sighed. "You are a strong man, sir. Life will teach everyone their lesson." Matthew nodded calmly. In his heart, the pain turned into firm resolve. The next day, Matthew gathered courage and went to see Helen at Mr. Collins' house. When she saw him standing at the gate in dusty clothes, her face hardened immediately. "Helen," Matthew said softly, "please, come back home. Let us manage this together. I still love you." Helen laughed coldly. "Home? Which home? That broken old house? I am done, Matthew. I cannot suffer with you. My life is over if I follow you." Matthew's voice shook. "We are husband and wife. This is the time we should stand together." She shook her head firmly. "No, I have moved on. I am finished with that life." Heartbroken, Matthew left. The next day, Matthew went into town to look for small work. As he passed a local bar near the market, he suddenly stopped. Through the open door, he saw Natasha and Susan sitting inside, drinking and laughing like nothing had happened. His heart sank. He walked in slowly and stood before them. The girls were shocked when they saw him. "Dad," Susan whispered. Matthew sat down carefully. "My daughters, I need to talk to you." Natasha frowned. "Father, what are you doing here?" Matthew spoke softly. "Please come back home with me, or at least help me beg your mother. We are still a family." Natasha laughed bitterly. "Family? Dad, we can't come and be following you to the farm. We don't like suffering." Susan nodded. "Yes, Father, that life is not for us." Matthew swallowed hard. "Then at least help me talk to your mother. Tell her to come back. I need her." Natasha shook her head sharply. "Never. How could you not think of building a decent house in the village when you had money? Now you want us to suffer with you?" Susan added coldly, "We are not village girls. Please don't embarrass us in public." Matthew stood up slowly. Outside, Matthew paused and wiped his eyes. That was the moment he accepted the final truth. His daughters no longer respected him. He lifted his head and walked away, ready to take the next step in his plan. 2 days later, Matthew was walking slowly along the village road, lost in thought. Suddenly, a black car stopped beside him. The door opened and Collins stepped out, looking proud and arrogant. He pointed at Matthew and said sharply, "Listen to me very well. Stay away from my woman. She told me you came to the house begging her. If you try that nonsense again, you are gone for life." Matthew stopped and looked at him calmly. "You are very stupid," he said quietly. "You don't even know who I am." Collins burst into laughter. "Who are you?" he mocked. "You? Once a big man, now a useless farmer. Shut up, my friend. Your time is over." Matthew's eyes darkened. "Be careful how you talk to people." Collins stepped closer. "This is my final warning. Stay away from my woman or else. Helen belongs to me now. Don't forget that." He entered his car, slammed the door, and drove off angrily. Matthew stood there alone on the road. Instead of anger, a small sad smile appeared on his face. So this is how the world works. When money goes, respect follows. That evening, Helen and Natasha sat inside Collins's house, laughing loudly. Helen shook her head and said proudly, "Did you hear what Collins did today? He insulted Matthew on the road. That serves him right. Very foolish man." Natasha laughed. "Yes, Mother. Imagine Dad being warned like a nobody. His pride has finally finished." Susan, who had been quiet, suddenly stood up. "Enough!" she shouted. Both Helen and Natasha turned to her in shock. Susan's eyes were red. "I know I was spoiled. I know I was lazy. But one thing I will never accept is that foolish man insulting my father. How dare he? Is he mad?" Helen stared at her. "Susan, watch how you talk." Susan shook her head angrily. "No, Mother, I am highly disappointed in you and Natasha. I am beginning to realize my mistake. Dad was not perfect, but he loved us. I should have stayed with him in Grandpa's house." Natasha scoffed. "Susan, stop acting holy." Susan pointed at them. "You both are evil. You chose comfort over family. I am ashamed." Before anyone could stop her, Susan grabbed her bag and stormed out of the house. Susan went straight to Colin's house. When he opened the door and saw her, he smiled proudly. But before he could speak, Susan exploded. "Listen to me very well," she shouted. "The next time you talk to my father anyhow, you will regret it. Do you hear me?" Collins laughed. "Who are you to talk to me like that?" Susan stepped closer, fearless. "You local illiterate champion. You think money makes you a man? Look at yourself, arrogant and ugly inside and out. Don't ever insult my father again." Collins's face turned red with anger. "Get out of my house." Susan pointed at him one last time. "This is your first and last warning. Stay away from my family." She turned and walked away, breathing hard but proud. For the first time since everything fell apart, Susan felt something she had never felt before: respect for her father. Susan returned to her father late that night. When Matthew saw her standing at the entrance of Grandpa's old house, dusty and tired, he was shocked. "Susan," he whispered, "why are you here?" She dropped her bag and fell on her knees. "Dad, I am sorry. I was blind. I was proud. I followed comfort and forgot love." Matthew rushed to her and lifted her up. "My child, stand up." Susan wiped her tears and said, "Dad, I already sold my gold jewelry. I raised 30 million naira from it." Matthew froze. "What?" She nodded. "Mum told me to use the money to go shopping for her clothes or buy her a car. I refused." She held his hands tightly. "Dad, I am giving you this money. Take it. Let us go to the city and start a small business. We will grow from there. I am ready to work. I am ready to learn. I don't want soft life again." Matthew couldn't hold it anymore. Tears rolled down his face. He pulled Susan into his arms and cried openly, "You don't know what this means to me. You have healed my heart." They both cried together for a long time, holding each other tightly. For the first time since everything collapsed, Matthew felt hope again. Not because of money, but because one heart had changed. "My daughter," he said softly, "this is the beginning of a new life. Hard work, honesty, and patience. Are you ready?" Susan nodded firmly. "Yes, Dad. I am ready." That night, under the weak village light, father and daughter made a quiet promise to rebuild their lives the right way, step by step. And unknown to Susan, her father smiled secretly, because the test had finally begun to bear fruit. The next day, Matthew and Susan arrived in the city quietly. They rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a calm neighborhood. It was nothing like the mansion they once lived in, but it was clean and peaceful. Susan looked around slowly and nodded. "This place is okay, Dad. We will manage." That evening, Matthew sat with her and said, "Susan, I want to invest the money into a business. Not luxury, not fast profit, real work." Susan became nervous immediately. "Father, are you sure? What if they scam you? We have already lost too much." Matthew smiled gently. "No, my child, I trust these people. I know what I am doing." Susan didn't argue again, but fear stayed in her heart. A month passed. Matthew became busy, leaving early every morning and returning late at night. Susan watched him closely. Something didn't add up. He spoke confidently on the phone, used business language, and people treated him with respect, even though he dressed simply. One night, Matthew sat Susan down and took a deep breath. "I can't hide it anymore. You deserve the truth." Susan looked at him confused. "What truth, Dad?" Matthew said calmly. "I never lost everything. I pretended to be poor. I did it to test your mother, your sister, and you. I wanted to see who would stand with me when money disappeared." Susan's eyes widened. Her mouth opened in shock. "What? You mean all this was a test?" Matthew nodded. "Yes, my companies are safe. My wealth is safe. Only a few trusted people knew." Susan was shaking. For a moment she didn't know whether to cry or shout. Then tears filled her eyes, not of pain, but of relief. She hugged him tightly. "Dad, I am happy. I am happy because I chose you. Even when I was wrong before, I came back." Matthew held her and smiled. "You passed the test, my daughter, not because of money, but because of your heart." They both laughed and cried at the same time. Susan wiped her tears and said, "I don't care if you are rich or poor. I just want to work, learn, and be better." Matthew nodded proudly. "And that is why you will never be poor in life." Back in the village, trouble exploded inside Colin's house. Helen returned early one afternoon and froze when she saw Natasha coming out of Colin's bedroom, adjusting her clothes. For a few seconds, both mother and daughter stared at each other in shock. Helen screamed first. "Natasha, what are you doing here?" Natasha crossed her arms boldly. "Mother, calm down." "Calm down," Helen shouted. "You are sleeping with the same man I am with?" Natasha laughed carelessly. "So what? That man has money. He can take care of both of us. We need comfort, not suffering." Helen's face turned red with anger. You are mad. You have no shame. I am your mother. Natasha fired back. And so, you taught us to love money more than family. Now you are angry because I learned well. Helen barked. You are a disgrace, sleeping with your mother's man. You have become shameless. Natasha stepped closer. You are the real disgrace, leaving your husband for a village man because of comfort. Look at you. The two women began shouting at each other, exchanging heavy insults. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering and shaking their heads. A mother and daughter fighting like rivals over the same man over money. Shameful, one woman whispered. This is what greed brings, another said. Collins stood outside, confused and embarrassed, unable to control the chaos he created. Not long after Susan and her father settled in the city, news began to spread quietly through the village. People started whispering. Some said Matthew was not as poor as everyone thought. Others said he was rebuilding his life quietly in the city. Some even said he had started a business again. The same people who mocked him before now spoke with fear and respect. When Helen heard the news, her heart dropped. She sat alone in Colin's house, staring at the wall. Shame covered her like a heavy cloth. She remembered how she insulted Matthew, how she refused to sell her gold, how she left him for comfort. For the first time, she felt truly naked inside, exposed and empty. Natasha also heard the news. She pretended not to care, but inside her heart was shaking. She remembered how she laughed at her father, how she called him senseless for not building a house in the village. That laughter now tasted bitter in her mouth. A week later, Natasha made a discovery that changed everything. She was pregnant. When she told Collins, she expected fear or confusion. Instead, he smiled lightly and said, "Keep it." Natasha was relieved. She thought this meant security. She thought this meant love. But Helen soon found out too. That evening, Helen confronted Collins angrily. "Is it true? Natasha is pregnant for you." Collins didn't deny it. He leaned back comfortably and said, "Yes." "So?" Helen shouted, "So, that girl is my daughter." Collins laughed coldly. "Then you should have raised her better." Helen's voice shook. "You are a wicked man. After everything I did for you, you now choose my daughter over me." Collins looked at her without pity. "Madam, you are too old and too bitter. You left your husband for me. How am I sure you won't leave me for another man tomorrow?" Helen gasped. "How dare you talk to me like that?" He pointed toward the door. "Please leave my house and my life. I have chosen Natasha. She is younger. She is more beautiful. She can still give me children." Helen burst into tears. "After everything, this is how you repay me?" Collins shrugged. "It's not too late for you. Go back and apologize to your husband. He loved you. You threw him away for comfort. Foolish woman." Those words cut deeper than a knife. Helen fell to the floor, crying, begging, but Collins didn't care. He opened the door and said firmly, "Leave." Helen walked out of the house that night with nothing. No husband, no dignity, no comfort. The same woman who once walked proudly was now broken and ashamed. Natasha, on the other hand, began to understand too late that Collins' love was not real. He loved youth, not loyalty. He loved convenience, not character. And far away in the city, Matthew continued rebuilding quietly, unaware that the same pride and greed that destroyed his home were now destroying themselves. Life was teaching its lessons slowly, painfully, and without mercy. Life moved fast after the truth came out. Susan's life changed completely. After Matthew revealed everything, he officially returned to his company as chairman. The board welcomed him with respect and shock. Many people who once laughed at him now bowed their heads in shame. Susan was introduced as part of the management team. At first, people doubted her, but Matthew did not give her any special treatment. She worked hard, came early, stayed late, and learned everything from the ground up. Within months, Susan became a manager in one of her father's major companies. People admired her discipline, humility, and growth. One evening, her former boyfriend came to see her. He knelt and apologized. "Susan, I was wrong. I judged you because of money. Please forgive me." Susan looked at him calmly and replied, "It's too late. I don't hate you, but I don't want you. When my family fell, you pushed me away. I learned my value without you." She walked away with dignity. Susan had learned the greatest lesson of her life. Self-worth does not come from luxury, but from character. When the truth about Matthew spread everywhere, Helen could not sleep. Shame followed her like a shadow. She remembered how she insulted him, how she left him in the village, how she chose another man without spending even one day with her husband in hardship. With trembling hands, she traveled to the city. When she arrived at Matthew's office, security treated her politely, but she felt small. When Matthew finally saw her, his face was calm, too calm. "Helen," he said softly. She fell to her knees and cried, "Matthew, forgive me. I was blind. I was foolish. Please take me back." Matthew closed his eyes for a moment and then opened them slowly. "Helen, it's too late." Her heart stopped. "What?" "I have moved on," he said, not with anger, with clarity. "I found someone who stood with me when I had nothing. You humiliated me publicly. You didn't stay one day with me in suffering. You left with another man. That is unacceptable." Helen cried loudly, "I made a mistake." "Yes," Matthew replied, "and every mistake has a price." He helped her stand. "Go back to your parents. Heal, learn, but I cannot be your husband anymore." Helen left the office broken. She returned to her parents' house with shame, no pride, no wealth, no status, only regret. Natasha believed she had won when Collins spent money on her. Clothes, phones, trips. She believed she was secure. Then one day, the truth came out. Collins' legal wife, Belinda, returned from abroad unexpectedly. She owned the money, the houses, the accounts. Everything Collins used to impress women belonged to her. Belinda stormed into the house and found Natasha sitting comfortably. "Who are you?" she demanded. Natasha replied confidently, "I am Collins' partner." Belinda laughed bitterly. "Partner, you are a thief living on my money." She turned to Collins. "You shameless man, using my money to disgrace me." That same day, Belinda chased both Collins and Natasha out of the house. Collins begged. Natasha cried. Nobody listened. Natasha was pregnant, homeless, ashamed. For the first time, she remembered her father's words. But it was too late. Susan stood beside her father as he reopened a charity foundation for young people, teaching skills and discipline instead of entitlement. Matthew looked at her proudly and said, "Money tests people faster than poverty." Susan nodded, "And poverty reveals truth faster than money." They hugged.